Hello everyone, I'm Nancy Juice, and I hope that you already got an introduction to the poem The Harp of India from the previous video. Now let's discuss the poem in detail. You might have already noticed the word harp in the title of the poem. In the poem also, he addresses the harp. Derozio addresses the harp. He used this word in the poem to symbolize the Indian literary and poetic tradition or the Indian poets. We can also say that it refers to the rich and varied Indian culture and tradition. There can be many speculations on why Derozio used harp and not any other musical instrument in its place. One of the reasons can be that harp was the first musical instrument played by the Tamil people as documented in Sangam literature. Bearing this in mind, we can relate that he used harp as a means to portray the rich Indian culture. And Bengal itself had a very interesting harp culture in its past. There are numerous carved harps or instances of carved harps in the temple reliefs of Bengal. And harp was one of the most important instruments in Derozio's country of origin, that is Portugal. And these might be the reason why he chose this particular instrument as a symbol in his poem. Before moving on, I would like to remember you that during Derozio's time, British had completely colonized India. Not only physical being, but the mental capabilities of the people were chained under colonialism. For a better understanding of the impact of colonialism, you just imagine that someone else come to your house where you live freely, and they immediately took control over the place and the system. See, over time, what happens is our manners and our lifestyle and our ways of being will be suppressed, and will be influenced by their mannerisms. And the end result will be like we are confused with our own identity. We'll lose our indigenous traditions and culture. This is what Derozio explains in this poem, the impact of colonialism that led to the loss of cultural and literary tradition of India. The poem opens with a rhetorical question. Why hangs thou lonely on yon withered bough? See here, though, thou, though or you refers to the harp, the Indian poetic tradition. And the poet is asking, why are you hanging there alone on the dried branch? The what? Withered bough means dried branch. And it lies there neglected on the barren environment. Right? See, withered bough, it symbolizes a barren state, a dried out environment. Right? And in the second line it says, unstrung forever must thou there remain. See, what is your condition right now? You are unstrung. And we know that stringed instruments no longer produces any sound or music once its strings are broken, right? So this is what happened with the harp here. The harp is unstrung and the unstrung harp cannot compose any songs. And then it says in the second part of the second line, that is the last part, must do there remain? He's asking, are you supposed to remain there? Are you the poetic tradition which had a magnificent or glorious past once, is supposed to remain there forever in such an unstrung state or a neglected state? And in the third line, the music was once sweet. Who hears it now? See, die or your music was once melodious. It was pleasant to the ears, and the harp used to produce exquisite music in the past. Here, the poet is recollecting the past state of the Indian poetry. But who hears it now? No one can hear it now. No one hears it now. It is neglected. And the fourth line, why did the breeze sigh over thee in vain? The breeze is blowing over the broken harp. but it makes no difference. No music is produced from our harp, our broken harp. So the breeze is sighing or blowing over the harp in vain. And the fifth line, silence had bound thee with a fatal chain. See, what happened to the harp is silence had confined the harp with her deadly chain. Fatal is deadly, right? So, deadly chain. And the deadly fetters of the colonial life under the British rule, or the colonial life, had made the poetic tradition or the Indian poets mute or silent. And we can say that they were made sterile in their poetic power. And also, not that silence is personified here, that silence with her fatal chain, her, so it is personified there. And the existing conditions of the time had made the harp silent, or the it made the Indian poets silent. And thus what happened to the poetry is it lies neglected, mute, or silent, or desolate. Now it become the art, the poetic art has become neglected, mute, and desolate. And it is now like a ruin monument on the desert plain, which is abandoned, which is in a ruin condition, which is in a deteriorated condition. And our Indian poetry or the harp is like a ruined monument. The first seven lines, that is the session that we discussed earlier, carried a tone of sadness. Right? It implies that the rule of British was actually a foil to India's own national or native heritage. And the rhythm and the music of the rich poetic tradition has been subdued. And the second part begins with a moan, but it ends with a hope. And now he shifts his focus from the heart to the poets. Okay, so the eighth line, that is, oh, many a hand more worthy far than mine. Here he says that there are many hands that are worthier than mine, that are better than mine, that are far more worthier than mine. And they touched the strings of the harp and they produced sweet songs. That is, the ancient poets produced melodious verses. See, in the next line, and many read for them that fame and time. See, we already saw that the hands, those hands which touch the strings of the harp, has created or produced melodious verses. And those melodious verses bring the poets enough fame. And in this line, fame is personified. Fame is doing an action. Okay, so fame is weaving a wreath or ring of flowers for our poets. Okay, and those flowers are still blooming on the minstrel's grave. Minstrel is poet, and those flowers are still blooming in their grave even after the death of poets. Okay, that is the art which is created as immortal, and that art bring life to the poet, or art make the poets alive. The 12th line says, those hands are cold. The hands that had once struck the harp, the strings of the harp, and produced melodious verses are now dead. And but if thy notes divine, maybe by mortal waken once again. See, we can also see that our Indian poets have become creatively frigid and unproductive. But if we are able to produce musical notes that are divine enough, we can revive the dead or lost poetic tradition. Here he's exhorting all of us. And look at the last line, harp of my country, let me strike the string. Harp of my country. Here it indicates as patriotic spirit. Let me strike the string. Let me play the harp. See, he ends the poem in a positive note. He is hoping, it ends with a hope that he is hoping that our poetical output can revive the dead or lost poetic tradition. The major theme of the poem, The Harp of India, is colonialism and the impact of colonialism on the Indian natives and our culture and tradition. So, talking about the literary devices employed by the poet, so look at the fourth line. Why did the breeze sigh over thee in vain? There, breeze is personified. See, what is personification? Personification is attributing human characteristics or human qualities to non-human or non-living thing, right? Here, breeze is sighing, so breeze is personified. And in the fifth line, silence had bound thee with a fatal chain. There, silence is personified. See, silence has bound thee, and silence is referred to as her. So, it is personified there. And in the seventh line, like ruined monument, there the poet employed simile. There, harp is compared to ruined monument. And in the eighth line, oh, many a hand more worthy far than mine. Their hand is a synecdoche. So, synecdoche is a figure of speech in which a part represents the whole or vice versa. So, here hand represent Indian poets, and since hand represent the Indian poets, it is a synecdoche. And in the 10th line, and many a wreath for them did fame entwine. They are also famous personified. As a home assignment, write a short note on the prevailing conditions of the time on Indian poetry.